This is your Monty moment. I'm Johnny Montalbano, getting you set for another big college football weekend. They're all big now as we come down the stretch of the season, and we're coming off a week last week that was just absolutely epic. You know the deal by now. Number 1, Tennessee. Number 4, Clemson. Number 6, Alabama. All falling on Saturday and shaking up the college football landscape. Not only the playoff picture, but really the landscape in college football. Because now you're talking about an Alabama and a Clemson that's already on the outside of the college football playoff picture looking in this early on. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. There's a very slim chance for Alabama to get back in it, but I mean, it's not going to happen. I mean, it just they're too flawed, and it's just not looking good. And I told you about Clemson this year, and boy, I even as a Notre Dame fan, I couldn't have believed the amount of effort. I mean, we did take them last week in the picks, but just still absolutely incredible. But you take a look as a result of those 3 games, and you look at the college football top 10 in the latest playoff rankings, you've got Clemson falling to number 10, Alabama falling to 9 as a result of them both losing, USC moving up to 8, and giving the Pac-12 really a shot here at maybe being one of those 4 teams in the playoff come New Year's Eve. But LSU with that huge win and that unbelievable 2-point conversion at the end there to win against Alabama, give Brian Kelly a ton of credit down there. They move up to 7, and even now they have a shot. Even as a 2-loss team, yes, they do have a possibility of getting in. That's how crazy it's been. And then you've got Oregon at 6. Tennessee fell to number 5. And then your top 4 through 1, TCU, Michigan, Ohio State, and Georgia. So looking at that, I think that is the right call. Now, we all know that's not going to be how it ends up. I mean, we know Ohio State and Michigan are going to play each other at the end of the year. You're going to get one Big Ten school into the top 4. So that's going to open up a spot. And then really the question marks are going to be, Georgia. I mean, I think the way they are right now, I think they're going to run this table and they're going to get in. So really, it's wide open. You know what? And I like the fact that TCU finally got the credit that they and the respect that they deserve. Now, have they looked totally dominant this season at times? No, but they've had some very good wins against ranked teams. Yeah, they have not blown teams out, but they've been in all these games. I think you have to give them credit. Now, they still have very challenging down the stretch here, so there's still a possibility they may not get in. And you know what? Tennessee still has a shot too, so they're not out of the woods. And you know what? The one thing we also learned from the second college football playoff rankings on Tuesday is that it was a good day for the Pac-12 because now you've got Oregon, you've got USC, you've got UCLA even that has a shot to get in. And you know what, Oregon, I know you're going to look at them first game of the season, that blowout loss to Georgia, but you know what, that was a team getting adjusted with a new head coach, a new quarterback. They've found their way. You know, they've got a big game coming up on Saturday night. That's going to be one of our 3 picks, by the way. So really, we sit here right now in early to mid-November with a few more weeks to go until we start getting to the conference championships and bowl season. And you know what? It's as wide open as it's ever been before. I still think Georgia's the best team in the nation. I think Ohio State's also up there too. I know that they've had a tough last 2 weeks. I think the weather has to be a factor when you look at last week, and they still won the game against Northwestern by 2 touchdowns. 70 straight games in the FBS with 20-plus points per a game. I mean, it's incredible. So those are the top 2. Michigan's not going to go quietly. I know they have not played a very week out of conference schedule, but you know what, they're doing the job, and you know, we'll see. You know, TCU, can they keep it going? Can Tennessee bounce back? Can they get in it? I mean, they still have an incredible win. You know, the Pac-12 has contenders. You know, you've got UCLA even with an outside shot. You've got a USC team whose only loss this year is by 1 point to Utah. And you've also got Oregon who's been finding their way. So it's so wide open. LSU, even with 2 losses, even they have a possibility to get in. So really, there's not a lot of, it's wide open. I think we're going to get more clarity through each and every week. But I will say that I think the committee did get this right this week versus last week. You know, the initial ones always, they're going to get something wrong. I think, though, they did a much better job of getting it right this week. So that's really when you take a look at it. And then also one other crazy nugget from last week that gets lost because of all the other craziness with Tennessee, Alabama, and Clemson losing. There was a history-making moment in college football last week between SMU and Houston. I don't know if you heard about this, but SMU defeated Houston 77-63. Yes, that is not a basketball score. That is a football score. An FBS record, 140 points combined in regulation, 16 total touchdowns, an FBS record as well in what was a crazy shootout game down there last week. So we go into this upcoming Saturday with still a lot of interesting decisions to be made here in terms of who's going to get in, who's going to be on the outside looking in. But we sit here right now with a few weeks to go, and we're looking at 8 teams for 4, as many as 8 teams for 4 college football playoff spots. And let's also remember, too, when the college football playoff gets expanded, like it's going to eventually, whether it's next year, 2020, whether it's next year, 2024, 2025, whatever, days like Saturday, you know what? They don't have as much drama. They don't have as much excitement because, you know, a loss like that for Alabama or Clemson or Tennessee, and they're still going to be in the postseason discussion. I mean, it does open up the outside shots for like the Pac-12 schools and stuff, but at the same time, you know what? I think this is the best they've got right now. I mean, again, I'm for expanded playoff. I think it was inevitable, but it also makes moments like we had last Saturday, you know, not that as exciting as it really was when you have the 4 teams in. So we have 8 teams for 4 spots with a few weeks to go. So let's get to our picks for this week. So last week we did pick an extra game for my friends at Coastal Carolina down here. You know, I reside here in South Carolina, and so I live 20 minutes away from the Coastal Carolina campus, and they've been put on the map. Obviously, that big game a couple of years ago during COVID against BYU, they were able to pull that one out, and they've been on the map. And you know what? They got a great win against Appalachian State last week. That, unfortunately, sorry for everybody, I did pick App State. It was not personal. It was just in terms of the picks and stuff. But you know what? Coastal totally dominated that game, and got to give them credit. And as far as the picks for me last week, I went 2-2. I lost with App State, laying them against Coastal. Coastal won their game outright. I took Alabama against LSU, which, I mean, I don't know why I did that. I mean, the history with Nick Saban there at Bryant-Denny Stadium, but it's just, look, you got to give Brian Kelly a lot of credit there, what he's doing at LSU. I mean, they are so far ahead of schedule, and they even have an outside, like I said, have an outside shot too. But we did win with Georgia, who was favored by 8 against Tennessee, and they won that game pretty convincingly. And we also took Notre Dame plus the 3.5, and they put an absolute beating on Clemson. So we went 2-2 last week, 15-16 for the season. We got 3 picks for you here on week number 11 to try and get you some winners. And I've got a couple of interesting games. You know, I'm not going to pick any of the major teams. I mean, I have one major team. I have the Oregon game that I'm going to select. But there's a couple of cool matchups inside even the top 25 in the college football playoff rankings here. And I'm looking at game number 1 here. We're going to start at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. This game's going to be on ESPN2. It's number 22 UCF taking on 17th ranked Tulane in a matchup of 2 similar teams when you look at it. The Tulane Green Wave, they are 8-1, a signature win over a Kansas State team that's in the top 25 too, and their only loss was a letdown game to Southern Mississippi the week after their upset. So you look at that, and on the other hand, UCF has a case of being the best team in the state of Florida. The Golden Knights, they're 7-2. They only trail the Green Wave in that conference by a game. And head coach Gus Malzahn, who we all know from the past, he's engineered a very offensively talented team there in UCF. They put up 40 points in four of their games this year, and 2 weeks ago had one of their biggest wins, if not their biggest win of the season, beating Cincinnati 25-21. So look at that, and you look at this Green Wave squad. Running back Tajay Spears, he's been on a tear for them, rushing over 100 yards in each of the last 3 contests. And again, these are kind of similar teams. UCF 47th in the nation in offense, 16th best on defense. Tulane 48th on offense, 11th in defense. But turnovers also something to watch too. Tulane's got a +5 turnover margin. The Knights have a -5. But we're going to take the UCF Knights here +1.5 in game number 1 with Gus Malzahn. I think their offense, which has been hot lately, I think it keeps it going. Tulane's going to be a good team. This is going to be a pretty close game, I think. And the line is low, I know, but I'm going to take the Knights, the more experienced team in the spot. So give me the UCF Knights, the 22nd ranked team, over 17th ranked Tulane, +1.5 in game number 1. Game number 2 happens at 7 p.m. Eastern on Fox. We are going to go to a Pac-12 matchup, and it's 6th ranked Oregon, who needs this game in a big way if you want to keep talking about them as a playoff team. They are home to take on 25th ranked Washington. Oregon is a 13.5-point home favorite in this one, and they have aced every test since that week 1 loss to Georgia. And the Ducks, when you look at it, they are 7-1 against the spread since. They've beaten rivals BYU, Stanford, UCLA by an average of 18 points per game. Washington has struggled on the road in one-score losses at UCLA and Arizona State, but they were one-score games, and that's something to keep an eye on here when you look at this line. And the Huskies did a nice job versus a good Oregon State team in their last outing, posting 398 total yards, 24 first downs, 11 of 18 on third down tries, and they gave up just 87 passing yards, 18 first downs, and 4 of 10 on third downs. So I think Oregon does continue to roll here. I think they do get this win, but this is a lot of points to lay, and I'm not going to lay that many points. I think Oregon wins. I'm going to take Kentucky, though, plus the 13.5 in game number 2. Say something like a 40-30 game in this one. So Oregon will win, but I think Washington keeps it close, and that's what we're going to do. Washington plus 13.5 in game number 2. In game number 3, wrapping up the night, we're going to do an ACC showdown down in Wake Forest at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. It's number 15 North Carolina taking on Wake Forest. Wake Forest, a 3.5-point home favorite in this one. But you look at the Tar Heels, I mean, they have looked incredibly well all season. You know, they had one blip on the radar, and that was Tulane, Notre Dame fighting Irish. But that's also making the Irish win look better. And you look at the way that Notre Dame has been, just go off on them for just a second here. I mean, it's incredible. Against the top caliber teams, they've been great. Now they're inside the top 20 in the college football playoff, which if you looked at their bad losses against Marshall and against Stanford, I mean, look, they've had a pretty good first year taking those blips out. And the sad thing is, you know, if you keep those in there and they win those games, we're probably talking about Notre Dame as a college football playoff team. But nevertheless, you know, it's been a transitional year for Notre Dame. We've highlighted that before. But looking at this one, Tar Heels, they're 8-1. And right now, it looks like they're favorites to win the ACC Coastal Division. And, you know, it's funny because you look at Wake Forest here, minus 3.5. They do have a quarterback that we know in possibly being an NFL quarterback, and Sam Hartman. His name has been brought up a lot, but he struggled recently. But you look at UNC, speaking of quarterbacks, you look at North Carolina's quarterback, Drake May here. He's been lighting it up the entire season. He's passed for just under 3,000 yards, 31 touchdowns compared to just 3 interceptions. He's putting up these gaudy numbers, and he's a freshman. I mean, that's very encouraging to Mac Brown and the Tar Heels. And he is destroying defenses. And, you know what? His name will come up in Heisman Trophy discussions by the end of the year. I mean, I'm not saying that he's going to win it, but, I mean, his name is going to be discussed up there. And you look at Wake Forest, and they had started out the year very, very strong, but the bloom has come off the rose here. 2 straight losses pretty much eliminated them from a conference contention. I mean, hopefully the only thing they really got going for them right now is being a spoiler. And they could derail North Carolina's hopes for a New Year's Six bowl game if they do pull this one out. I know that they are favorites. I know they've got Sam Hartman, who has been talked about as being an NFL draft quarterback, but he has struggled here. 3 interceptions in each of the last 2 games. And I think he has a chance to right the ship here against this North Carolina pass defense. I mean, there are going to be holes in their coverage. That's what happens. But North Carolina plays shootouts. But I like North Carolina the way they've been playing these last couple of weeks. And Drake May, he's been, as I said, he's been on fire. They know how to put up points. I know Wake Forest can put up points too, but we've seen them be in shootouts as well. We know that their loss against Clemson was in a shootout earlier in the season. I think this is going to be kind of along the ways. But you look at that line, North Carolina getting 3.5 points on the road here. That hook also helps me too. So I'm going to take North Carolina plus the 3.5 to wrap up the day in an ACC showdown in game number 3. So we're taking not 3 upsets, but 3 teams getting points here. 2 upsets and 1 cover in our picks this week. We're going to take UCF plus 1.5 over against Tulane. We're going to take Washington getting 13.5 on the road against Oregon. I think Oregon's going to win, but I think Washington keeps it close. And we're going to wrap up the night with North Carolina getting a plus the 3.5 on the road against Wake Forest in game number 3. And again, another critical week for college football as we get ever so close to the playoff. Again, 8 teams for 4 spots. That's what the picture looks like right now. We'll see what happens as we look ahead to next week. And of course, we'll keep you updated right here on the Monty Moments, and of course on my show Game On. And for more, you can like us on Facebook and Twitter at GameOnETB and follow me on Twitter at Montalbano NY. This has been your Monty Moment College Football Edition. I'm Johnny Montalbano.